Hi, everyone. Welcome to the Kidlit Social. I'm Laura Backus, publisher of Children's Book Insider, and we have an amazing, interesting, awesome conversation lined up for you tonight. So let's get started. Those of you who are new to us, welcome. If you would like to get on our list so that you will be notified of all our upcoming social guests as well as other fun things we do, go to writeforkids.org/ultimate-cheat sheet. That'll get you on our list, and also you will get a free ebook from us, the Ultimate Children's Writing Cheat Sheet, where we have compiled 32 years worth of beginner information on writing for children, and it is yours for signing up to our list. And we do not bombard you with emails. We send an email every other week or twice a month about the social, and then one or two others usually during the month about other stuff we're doing. It's not a big deal. And if you are new to us and you are interested in subscribing to Children's Book Insider, that is the newsletter that is now in its 32nd year of publication. writeforkids.org/CBI is a special deal we have for our socialites, $5 a month. It's about 20 pages a month, arrives in your inbox. Thank you, Reed. This is worth every penny. Oh, thank you, Sharon. And one of our great features is we have an interview every month with either an editor or an agent, and they give us a special above the slush pile link. It's actually, it's a link now. It's not a code. We need to change the slide, where you can submit for 30 days and jump over the slush pile. Your stuff will get read first. Or if the editor or agent is close to submissions, they will open it for 30 days just for our people. So that is worth the price of admission right there. Thank you, Joan. So now we have Celebrate. Now last social, 2 weeks ago, if you were here with me, sorry, I'm time challenged today. We had like 6 or 7 celebrations, which was awesome. Now I know it's summer finally and things slow down. So I have one really great celebration. PJ McIlvain, who's one of our great contributors to Children's Book Insider, has sold her young adult debut novel, The Curious Conundrum of Charlemagne Cross, to Orange Blossom Publishing. The pub date is scheduled for September 2023, and she writes, "It's a YA alternative history adventure set in Victorian London. An evil Queen Victoria, a determined heiress, a psycho cat, solar eclipses, corsets, lobotomies, and a doomed romance." All the good stuff. How could you pass that up? And I love it when a publisher puts out this really nice announcement on their website about upcoming books, even if it's something that's over a year away. That's really nice. So you can go read about PJ there on the Orange Blossom Publishing website and see all the other books she's done. This is her first YA. So congrats, PJ. We're very excited for you. And I want to hear your good news. So please email me, mail@writeforkids.org, and put "celebrate" in the subject line. That's very important, or it will get routed into the wrong folder. And I will feature your good news on a future Kidlit social. And if you've been with us a while, you know that it doesn't have to be a publication. We love to celebrate every bit of the journey with you. So if you found a critique group, or you finally sent out your first query, or you got a really great feedback from an editor and you're going to start your revision, whatever it is, we want to celebrate it. So let me know. And I have something to celebrate. Next week, next Tuesday, the 28th, at this same time. So it's 8 p.m. Eastern, 5 p.m. Pacific. We're going to have a free webinar. How to write a great query letter for magazine articles. So Carrie Flanagan is the creator of our magazine writing blueprint, and she is offering a free webinar just on the art of writing the query letter for magazines. When you sell your work to a magazine, especially the nonfiction stuff, you usually sell it on the basis of a query before you even have to write the piece. So she's going to talk about how to do that. And you can use this technique for any kind of magazines, children's magazines, parenting magazines, magazines for adults, travel magazines, whatever it is you want to write. This is how you're going to pitch your article idea to the magazine editor. So if you're interested in writing for magazines, I really hope you join us. Go to this link, bit.ly/free4mags, and it's all lowercase. And again, at the replay, we'll have this link under the video. And we will see you next week, but you do have to sign up to get the link to attend. Okay, my link of interest this week is very, very cool. You know, Kate DiCamillo is one of my favorites, probably one of your favorites. She did an interview on the Today Show, and she talked about getting 473 rejection letters. So you have to watch this because she is the most amazing author. I think, truly one of the most amazing authors alive today. And it's very inspirational. So I created a bit.ly link to take you straight to this interview, bit.ly/Kate DiCamillo today. And you see I capitalized her name and the word today. So make sure you do that. But again, we'll have the link under the replay if you want to look for it there. Very cool. It's like a 5-minute interview, but worth your time for sure. She's always so inspirational. All righty, now we get to welcome my guest, Michelle Schusterman. Sorry, I just tripped over that. Michelle is the author of over a dozen critically acclaimed novels for middle grade and young adult readers. Her books have received starred reviews from Kirkus, Booklist, and Publishers Weekly, and have received honors, including multiple Junior Library Guild selections, the CBCC Best of 2019 list, ALA's Rainbow list, and Quick Picks for Reluctant Readers list, and the North Carolina State College of Education Comic Relief Reading list. Wow, that's a great list to be on. She's also a book coach and a big proponent of creating a succinct book description early in the writing process to help you know if your idea is working. And then you use this description at other points during the process. So tonight we're going to get some great tips from her on writing both a book description and a 1-sentence pitch. So stay tuned for that. All right, well, Michelle, please join me.
There I am. Hi. Hi, everybody. Thank you so much for that. Congratulations to PJ. That book sounds amazing. Evil Queen Victoria. I'm in.
Oh, yeah.
Description. Loved
Absolutely. All right. Well, thanks for being here. I think we have a really good, enthusiastic crowd tonight to listen to what you have to say. So I'm happy about that. So let's jump right in here. Now, you really champion writing the book description early in the process, even before creating the outline, you've said, if possible. So is this something you've always done, or did you kind of develop this over trial and error and, you know, lots of years of work?
I'm going to be really honest about this. It was in the beginning, it was because my agent told me to. I liked writing pitches early on, but I was not very good at it. I just thought it was fun and it kind of helped me visualize what I wanted out of my idea. Mm-hmm. But it wasn't until the book that I signed with my agent on, we went on submission, but ultimately did not sell. And I was working on another book and it got out of my, it was like 3 books crammed into one, you know?
Oh yeah, they get out of control, don't they?
And my agent was like, look, write 1 sentence that tells me what this story is about. And I could not do it. I could not do it because it was too much and I wasn't willing to give anything up. And she was like, if you can come up with 1 sentence that's like the heart of your book, you need to stick it up over your laptop so that you never forget what it is while you're working on it, because it's going to be like your light post, you know, like it's going to guide you. And that's why, and it's happened to me multiple times since then. I get carried away with ideas, especially if it's a series, which I know we're going to talk about later, and writing that really succinct description at the start, even if it changes later. I'm flexible. If I write an outline and then I write a draft and I find the story is different than what I originally intended, I'll change the pitch. But just in the beginning, it helps me to like kind of get centered, like, okay, this is what the book is. So
That's
yeah.
great. And I'm so happy to hear you say that, because whenever I taught writing and in our blueprints, we have the same technique. You have to boil it down to that one sentence. And if you can't, and you talked about novels getting out of control, but it happens a lot with picture books as well, which are
Imagine.
so tight.
Yeah.
And if you can't sum up your picture book in one sentence, it's way too much story for
It's
a
over.
picture book. Yeah,
Yeah, for sure.
absolutely.
Absolutely.
Absolutely. So now the one sentence pitch is a very specific thing, and
Mhm.
that's used a lot these days, in particular Twitter pitch parties, and also a lot of the online submission forms that editors and agents use. They ask for that one sentence pitch
Yeah.
up front. And why do you think this is so important now in the children's publishing industry?
I think I think really, to me, it goes back to when you think about it, until the internet existed, if we wanted to find a book to read, we would walk into a library or a bookstore, and there was a lot of books on the shelf, but like a finite number. And now it's like gazillions of books online. How do we sift through all of that? I think
Mhm.
the one sentence pitches helps readers know immediately, this
Yes.
is probably in my wheelhouse or it's not. And,
Mhm.
for agents and editors too, they're getting, because we've moved from paper queries and paper submissions to email, the influx is like, I can only imagine it's probably, quadrupled, if not more for them.
Yes.
It's a matter of time.
Yeah,
It's a matter of
absolutely.
just getting to the point. I really think that's what it comes down to. But like I said before, I also think it really helps the writer. I think
Mhm.
it's hard to drill your whole big beautiful book down into one sentence, but it's also really good for you to try to do it, because
Mhm.
it'll force you to remember the heart,
Yeah.
like remember what's beating at the center of your story.
Mhm. Mhm. That's very true. Very true. So I think writing this one sentence pitch terrifies writers more than creating the entire manuscript in most cases.
Right.
So do you have some pointers for writing this?
Right. I do think, first of all, that if you haven't started writing your outline or draft yet, it is actually easier to do it in the beginning.
Mm.
That isn't to say, that I understand it's challenging to do once you have a draft. And I have a little formula that I was going to share actually in a little bit that might actually really help with that. But
Yeah.
if you can do it in the beginning, and remember, tell yourself, this isn't permanent. I'm not carving this in stone. I can change this later, but for right now, this is what I think my idea is about. And really try to flip your brain from being the writer who is super into every single detail of your book to a reader who is looking for something to read and they're in a hurry. Like,
Mhm.
just really get down to the basics of it.
Mhm. Right. And I think it really helps you see if your idea has something unique about it,
Hmm.
because it's going to stand out in that one sentence pitch.
Yes.
If it sounds like a whole bunch of other books that you've read,
Yeah.
you need to work harder on your idea, I think.
This is definitely something I was going to bring up. I
Mhm.
was looking at your questions and planning what I was going to say, but figuring out how, especially if you're writing genre fiction, if you're writing horror or mystery or fantasy, there are certain premises and certain tropes that we expect to see, and there's nothing wrong with that. And if your pitch includes that, that's great, but you want to include that one little thing that makes it totally different from everyone else's
Mhm.
in your
Mhm.
genre, whether it's a world building thing, whether it's your main character's situation, where, anything like that,
Right.
just one little detail that makes it different.
Yeah, for sure. Great. Well, we'll definitely circle back to that. That is a point that deserves repeating. So when we get into the longer book description that you write,
Hmm.
what are some important elements in that? And when you're writing at the beginning, I know you said you can change it as later if you need to, but at the beginning, are you writing it to kind of pitch the idea to yourself? Are you
Oh
imagining a
yeah.
reader out there who's receiving it? Who's the audience for this?
In the very beginning, when I'm first writing a pitch and I don't have an outline, I'm just developing the idea. I actually use this as an opportunity to see the big picture for myself first, you know. And so one of my closest friends was an agent for almost 10 years. And she gave me, one day we were talking about this was years ago. She gave me what she calls the query formula, but it could also be called the pitch formula. And I'm prepared. I think I wrote it down, but if I do this in Zoom, is it backwards? Yeah.
No, it looks good. I can read it.
Oh, you can?
assume
Okay. I
everybody else
also
can.
typed it in the chat. So I'm going to
Oh, great.
put it in the chat right now, but I'll just go ahead and read it for you. And I'll put it like this if you want to screenshot it. So it's character was status quo until inciting happens. And here's how that affects the character's life. Now, character must goal despite conflict or else consequence. And so everything in all caps, those are like the ingredients. And when this is like one of the first things I do. I sit down with this formula when I have an idea and I've been kind of brainstorming it for a while and I'm ready to take it to the next level.
Right.
And I'll just list character, status quo, inciting, all of those all caps things, and I'll write whatever I can about them. And I will put these two sentences together and it's going to be like two rambling, terrible sentences that are just for me, but it forces me to think about who the character is, because I don't just put their name, I'll put whatever makes them unique, you know, as a character. Status quo, because I like to show how their life needs to change at the beginning of the story.
Right.
Obviously, the inciting incident or the catalyst, the thing that happens that sets everything in motion, and what it does to them, how it changes them, how it sets them on this adventure. And then the second sentence, how they have a goal. So we know they have a clear want. Despite a conflict, whatever standing in their way, probably a villain, depends on your genre. And then the last one is a big one for me because I always forget it, or else consequence. And if you can work in that consequence, you're going to have stakes. You're going to show in your pitch that you have high stakes in your story. So it can be two sloppy sentences, but it gives you something to start with, and it makes the process so much less intimidating, because then you're basically editing it and shaping it and, you know, choosing the words you want and making it a little voicey maybe. And, but yeah, that's absolutely my starting point for a pitch, and makes it a lot easier for me to
That's terrific. Thank you so much for that. If you wouldn't mind holding that back up on the screen in case people have missed it in the chat. But that's so useful. Now, I imagine you're going to look at these things that you filled in the caps and really analyze if they are the right things for your story before you start writing. You need to hold every decision up and say, is this the best decision for my book? And for example, are the consequences big enough? Will a reader feel that they are important? And so I imagine at that point, you're starting to think of your audience and saying, will my audience care about this, or do I need to raise the stakes even more?
Yes, exactly. And I think it also really helps, depending on how your ideas come to you. Everybody is different. I know with me, more often than not, the thing I see most clearly is the inciting incident. I got this character in my head and this thing happens and it sets them on this adventure, and then things get a little vague. So that second sentence, like going through goal, conflict, and consequence, it'll really it'll help me hone in on getting to the halfway point, and then especially just getting to the ending and figuring out how I want to wrap things up. And like you said, the stakes, especially. But some people, I think they know how they want it to end. They know, but getting there is what's muddled for them. And that's when the first half of the pitch, I think, can really help you get your ducks in a row, kind of.
And is it important that the two sentences make sense together? I mean, should the goal have something to do with the inciting incident? Should they somehow be connected so that the inciting incident either raised the goal for the character or, whatever it was? Otherwise, you kind of have, you might be forcing the story. It's all got to hold together.
I think the goal can definitely be tied to the inciting incident, but it could also be a goal the character has at the beginning. Before everything starts, like their status quo. Usually at the beginning of a book, even if a characters think their life is all good, we as the reader can see something needs to change, like things aren't all that great, you know.
Right.
And they might have a goal, and then the inciting incident is the big thing that's like getting in their way.
So it's kind of,
Or
yeah,
just
it's the roadblock. Yeah.
fancy things,
Yeah.
exactly. Yeah.
Yeah.
But they
Correct.
will it will all tie together. Absolutely.
Sure. Sure. I love it. This is awesome. All
Thanks.
right. Well, and everyone, I will, with the replay, will take that out of the chat box, and I will type that below the replay as well, so you'll get that. But that is just great. Thank you.
Of course.
Our high-tech slides. I love it. Works for me. So your books all seem to target a very specific reader, a very specific audience. And you describe this reader in different ways. So on your website, as you have your books scrolling by, you mention this would be good for readers who like, and you have comp titles or even a movie. For example, your book, Some Bunny to Love, on your website, you say a middle grade novel perfect for fans of The Secret Life of Pets. So that tells me, you know, this is the taste, this is the kind of thing this reader likes. On Amazon, you have the one sentence description in bold before the longer description, and it says, a lost bunny teams up with a rascally streetwise puppy to find her way home in this adorable friendship story set in New York City. Again, also gives me a lot of information about the type of middle grade reader and sort of where in the middle grade spectrum your books are hitting. It seems like it's maybe a little more on the younger end than the older, or kids who like those kind of stories. Why on your website do you focus just on the comp titles and don't have the longer description?
The longer descriptions on Amazon, I'm pretty positive my publisher actually put those there, but I definitely had them up on my website first. And the reason I did that is actually because I was putting that slideshow, like you said, together, and I thought, you know, I could put a longer pitch. I could put like the back cover blurb on there.
Sure.
But why? I mean, if people are going to look at these, they're just going to be flipping through. And again, it's like what I said at the beginning. I just thought if you liked Doll Bones or Coraline, you would like Olive at the Backstage Ghost. If you like Homeward Bound, you would like My Outer Half. Yeah, just coming up with that one kind of comp, I thought it would be enough to pique a reader's interest so that they could click through and then read a fuller description somewhere else.
No, it makes sense because you want to, there's so much out there to scroll through, you know, especially if you're looking online for books.
Right.
And you want to grab them and stop them, give them a reason to pause and go, let me check into this, and maybe then click through to the Amazon listing and read the fuller description or whatever. So I actually liked that a lot. I thought that was a great way to do it. And I haven't seen a lot of authors that focus on that technique on their websites. So I thought that was interesting. Yeah. So is it important when conceiving of their idea, developing their idea, that writers have this very specific reader in mind, more than just middle grade, 8 to 12, but really drill down in the early stages? Is that essential, do you think?
I think it's essential to do it at some point in the process. For me, it is better in the beginning, but if maybe it's better for you to wait until you have a draft and you're revising. But ultimately, when you're about to query, or if you're self-publishing, whenever you're writing your pitch, you want a very specific reader in mind. And I think, okay, I'm going to disclaimer, I'm not a marketing person at all, but I have heard the advice that marketing experts will give to businesses that are selling a product or a service is to write a profile of their ideal customer, and they force them to get extremely specific. What is their gender? Sometimes it will make them name them. Like my customer is Joan, and she's 35 years old, and she's a single mother of 2. And a literal specific person. And people resist it so hard because what do we all want to say? I want everybody. I want this to appeal to everybody. I want a huge audience. Of course we do. And of course, anyone who makes a product or sells a service is going to want as many customers as possible. And the point isn't just so that you can target all the 35-year-old Jones with two children in the
Yes.
world. It's that when you have a vision of a very specific, in our case, kid in
Mhm.
mind, you know, a 12-year-old boy who loves gross out books and humor, you know, but maybe he can deal with a little more mature content too. Or, you know, a 9-year-old girl who loves horror, but like more the Coraline kind and not the Fear Street kind.
Sure.
Just the more you can zone in on that, the more it's going to help you answer questions about your own story when they come up as you're working on it. For example, I was actually on an author's live stream yesterday, and somebody in the chat asked, I'm writing a middle grade horror. It's my first time writing in this genre. How can I, you know, how do I know how scary is too scary? And this is what we talked about, because the answer to that is, well, what reader are you targeting? Some kids can handle super scary. I was reading Stephen King when I was 12, and there's a lot of kids like that. And then some kids cannot.
Right.
They'll do some kind of like jump scare, funny scary books, but like the darker scary books, no.
No.
And then there's like the blood and gore kind of horror, the more psychological horror, the ghost creepy crawly horror. You know, the more you can identify what that reader loves, the more you'll be able to answer your own question about your book, because the truth is there's no right answer.
Right.
It's what you want your book to be.
Yeah. Well, and that's so important in every part of the process. You need to be able to communicate with your readers in any sort of social media you do, when you're doing book signings, when you're doing school visits, when you're doing quick little YouTube videos about, hi, I've got a new book coming out, whatever it is, and the tone you take and the words you use and the vehicle you choose is got to appeal to the particular readers you're trying to reach. And so it's so important. And I know I see this a lot in picture books. I used to critique manuscripts, and I would get a lot of picture book submissions where they'd say, it's for kids from 3 to 103. And I go, no. First of all, that's not a thing, okay? But you can't appeal to everyone with every book. It's impossible. And I think if you try, you water down your story too much.
Oh man, that's a whole other topic.
Yeah.
You are so right. I have something I know we're going to talk about a little later, but I've done a lot of ghostwriting and I've done a lot of IP projects, and I've worked with too many publishers and too many clients who fall into that trap. Well, let's take this out because it might be too much for this, and let's not add that because, and then you've just got kind of a flat, boring book. You're not going to please everybody, you know? Yeah.
And who's going to talk about a flat, boring book? No one. Who's going to recommend it to their friends? You know, because you're not even going to remember it after you finished reading it.
Right.
It's the books that really either speak to you because they hit you right in the emotional core, or that you just read and go, oh my God, no. That's okay, because you're still going to talk about it. And you're going to say to your friends, it's way too scary. And then the friends who like scary are going to go, great, let me read it. So that they can't talk about it if it's just boring.
Right.
Yeah. But that can be scary for a new writer, especially to take those risks and really sort of draw those lines.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right. So let's talk about series. So you've talked about you've written several series. Do you do a description for the overall series and then another one for each book? Is that how it works?
I'm going through right now in my head the series that I've written, and every time what I did was I put together, I would write the complete draft, but I would also put together a pitch for the series. And it doesn't even have to be a full pitch. It's similar to how when screenwriters are coming up with like a new television show or a web series, they want to pitch it to the network or the service in a way that shows that it has legs. It's a premise that you can get episode after episode after episode out of. And that's how it is with the series. So I'm going to use one example is my second series was it's called the Kat Sinclair Files, and it's like Nancy Drew but with ghosts. And my series pitch, I'm not going to remember it word for word because this was a long time ago, but it's about a girl whose father becomes the host of one of those ghost hunters, like paranormal TV shows. And so the two of them with the cast travel around the world and visit haunted locations and investigate them. And that's something you can get. I mean, every book would be in a new cool location, in a new haunted location. There's so much fun ghost stuff you could explore there. Is the place really haunted? Is it not? Is it Scooby-Doo style and somebody's faking it? You know, so that was like the big series thing. And then I had a pitch for book 1. And I believe because I did want them, I wanted it to be 3 books and I wanted a 3-book deal. I did do like a paragraph of book 2 pitch and a book 3 pitch. And what I really tried to show there is I showed that she was in a different location in each pitch, and just generally, here's the kind of mystery that's happening. But what I wanted to show was that the 3 books, she had an emotional arc that would peak into and come to a conclusion in book 3. And for her in particular, her emotional arc was about the fact that her dad accepted this job because her mother had just left them, and she was harboring a lot of anger and resentment at her mother. And that was her real story. It had nothing to do with the ghosts. And it took 3 books of working her through that to give her some closure on her parents' divorce. So you really want to think about that when you're doing a series 2, is showing that it has legs, that here's why you can get a lot of books out of this premise, but also each one is going to feel like a complete novel because the character is going to have this emotional journey that is going to conclude in some way and then open up to a new way to progress, if that makes sense.
Absolutely. Now, is it important in series, when you have a trilogy like that, to have that arc that links the 3 books together that is not complete until the end of the trilogy, that emotional arc?
I think it is. It was at least, if you're going to do a duology, a trilogy, something where you have a concrete ending in mind, then I do think, especially if you're talking about writing a proposal and trying to sell the publisher on this idea, I think that's key. I'm actually working with a client as a book coach right now we're getting a proposal together for a duology. And that's what I'm trying to show. Like, here's how book 1 concludes in a satisfying way, but why we need book 2 and how, how that's going to go.
Right.
I do have though, and especially since we're talking about younger readers here, these are really common, static series, which is like Sideways Stories from Wayside School or Nancy Drew, where there's no finite ending. There's just an unlimited possibility for the number of books.
Right.
And I do have one series like that. Sadly, it only ended up being 2 books. But when we pitched it, we came up with 5 like pitches for books 1 through 5, just to show it's about these kids in this quirky little town where things are a little bit off, and like each one is its own little adventure, but here's why there's potential for us to just keep going with this, infinitely.
Right. Right. You're right. And especially in the younger, like the chapter book series, they tend to be a lot of those, like you call static series, where it's just a bunch of books that have the same characters, but there's not necessarily a plot arc that starts in book 1 and ends in book 27 or however many,
Right.
And in my mind anyway, those series, it's often the setting or the sort of concept of the series as a whole that has enough interesting stuff to it that you can see that there could be a lot of different books, and they do often have several main characters. It's not always just one, because I think that gives you a lot more story possibilities too. Yeah, absolutely.
The example I gave, it was about 5 kids, but we also had some stories from points of view of, there was one, the second book I think had a chapter that was from the point of view of a teacup pig. So, yes, lots of different characters.
That's awesome. I just want to remind everybody, if you have questions, please put them in the Q&A and we'll get to those in just a minute. Before we move on, I do want to ask about your ghostwriting real quick, but just to finish up this book description discussion. So you have the version you write at the beginning, and it may change a bit as you go along. Then you're going to write a version that you actually use in your query letter, right? When you're sending it out to editors or agents. obviously it's going to match the book you actually wrote. That's important.
Right.
But do you also want it to match the tone, the voice of the
Yeah,
book? Do you work on that kind of thing as well?
I do. That's the point where once I have the draft, like you said, and I know this is what I want it to be, I go look up all those books I would consider to be comp titles. This is for fans of this book, and I go read their descriptions every single, I mean, I will
Mm,
spend, it's fun. I will spend hours on Goodreads going through and reading them, mostly of books, making sure that they're books I've read so that I can see, okay, I know I've read this whole book. How did they sum it up in an enticing way?
mhm.
And I will very frequently write multiple different query letters. And what I'll do is completely take the pitch off the back of someone's book and look at it and then like mimic the style of it, the setup for it for my own book and see if that works. And then I'll do it with another book and another book and another book. And usually I'll end up with a bunch of pitches and none of them are quite right, but all of them I'll be able to see a little something like, oh, I really like how that showed the stakes. So I'm going to pull that out, and I'll like
Mhm.
kind of start Frankensteining
Ah,
together my own pitch. But yeah, I would definitely say read a lot of pitches,
mhm.
a lot of book blurbs or jacket cover copies, whatever. We have so many different things that we call them. You know what
Yeah,
I'm talking about. For
that's yeah,
inspiration. Yeah.
great idea. You don't have to reinvent the wheel. You can
Oh,
base what you're doing off of what other
and
people have
I
done.
will also say this is I would be shocked if somebody hasn't asked this already because it's a question I get a lot. Because it's hard, especially if you're writing a multi POV novel.
Mm,
Because even that formula I gave you guys, that's the biggest question I get on it is, well, this says character. What if I have multiple characters? What it's about a cast. And so I definitely look up all the multi POV, middle grade, or whatever age level
mhm.
novels that you can and see how they did it. Did they focus on, I will say this, and I'm sorry, I'm getting off on a little
That's
tangent,
okay.
but the two biggest things I see is
Mhm,
that either one, there is a primary main character and the
mhm,
pitch will focus on that. So decide if your novel has that prime character, or the cast themselves, you can fill them in. Like the cast was status quo until the inciting incident happens. If there's a way you can describe all of them together, like for my
mhm.
series I was talking about, it was fifth graders in a topsy-turvy town. They were all
Mhm.
different kids, but it was the town that kind of made things weird.
Sure.
Or like Lost is a bunch of survivors of a plane crash. That's how you would pitch that show. Survivors of a plane crash on an island together. You don't pick one of them to focus on. So
Mhm.
do you have the cast you can describe in a couple words like that, or do you have the one primary character? I
Right.
would start there.
Yeah. Because the cast functions as the problem is
Yeah.
something the entire cast has. They may react to it in different ways, but as far as the plot is concerned, the entire cast is dealing with
The,
this thing. Yeah. The
yep.
plane crash or whatever. Yeah. Great. Great. Well, thank you. That was
Mhm.
actually a question I was going to ask you. So you
Oh, good. Oh, I'm
already
sorry. I
answered
didn't mean
it.
to leave it
Yay.
on.
So let's talk quick about your ghostwriting, and then I want to get to the Q&A. Because I get asked a lot by people, how do I become a ghostwriter? And it's like,
Me
well,
too. I hear
probably,
that a
yeah,
lot.
yeah. So I will let you answer that.
Okay, so the way that started was when I signed with my agent in 2010. She asked me early on if I was interested in doing IP work, which is when a publisher comes up with an idea for a book and they hire an author to write it. And I was like, yeah, that sounds really fun. And over the years, she had got me auditions. I mean, I probably auditioned for a couple projects every year. I think I have about a 50% success rate at getting them, because most houses they'll have like a dozen authors write sample chapters, and or whatever the audition process
Mhm,
is, and they'll pick one. Um, so it started with IP work, and that gave me the confidence in, I want to say it was 2018, I was thinking to myself, I really love this, but I don't want to just wait for opportunities from publishers to come in. I bet there are people out there who just want to hire a ghostwriter to write their idea. And I discovered the website Reedsy, Reedsy.
mhm.
Yeah. And Reedsy.com. There's a lot of, it's a like kind of a marketplace where you can hire editors. I mean, if
Mhm.
you guys are probably familiar.
Right.
crazy. And so I set up a profile on there and waited and waited and waited. And then I finally got my first client. It did take a while. And then after that, it just blew up because once I ghost wrote his book, pretty much using the same process I used for writing IP projects, which I'll talk about in a second. And he left a great review. And all it takes is that one review for people to be like,
Sure.
okay, this person seems legit. And then more requests started going in, and it's just been going ever since. So did you want me to talk about the process?
A little bit, yeah. I think, for example, especially if a person is hiring you to write their story or a story that their name is going to be on,
Right.
do you have to learn what their voice might be and write it in their voice?
Oh, okay. So most of the private clients I get, the vast majority of them have never actually written a novel before. They're not published. I have one client who I am ghostwriting her fiction, but she is published in nonfiction. And we collaborate very closely. It's almost co-authoring, but I'm writing the draft, if that makes sense. I do make it really clear to them that they are free to make as many changes to the draft I give them as they want. Obviously, it's their book. But in the beginning, because I don't have a lot of their actual writing to read, so I don't know what voice they want, I have a questionnaire for them to fill out. And the questionnaire will ask them a lot of questions about the story, especially getting those ingredients that I mentioned earlier in the query formula, the status quo and the inciting, just trying to get as much info as I can. But then I will ask them things like, list as many books, TV shows, movies as you can think of that you would compare this to. List as many author, like if you could have any author write this book, who would you want to write it? Because that'll tell me a lot about the kind of style and voice that they're going for. Just lots of questions like that. And if I'm not familiar with any of the recommendations they have, I go out and read it. I get it like real clear in my head. This is what they want. And yeah, so that's how I find it.
Yeah. Now, one of your, or I think two of your series for kids books, those were ghost written, right? At least I thought I saw.
Let's see. I've with the IP projects, it's sometimes I want to call it ghostwriting because it's so similar, but my name's on it. So it's
Yes.
So I wrote, for example, I wrote the fourth book in the Girls Who Code series. I wrote, and this doesn't have my name on it, but it's also not supposed to be a secret, so I don't think it's ghostwriting. But I wrote 3 books in the Animal Jam series, which is a tie-in with a National Geographic online video game. And what else? Actually, my very first book deal, I Heart Band, that was an IP project. It was kind of a special one because they allowed me to hold the copyright, and it was an advance against royalties. Usually, what's it called? IP is like a flat fee kind of thing. Right. I think it was because my editor, was a band kid. She played French horn. She just really wanted somebody who was a band kid and who got it. And that was me. I used to be a band director. I have a degree in music education. It was like a total serendipitous match. And they just were like, you're the right person for this book. And so they actually made it my book. Like it was kind of, does that make sense? It was a weird situation.
That's great. That is very unusual. Yeah.
But I'm trying to think of, I've probably forgotten some.
But well, that's great, just to know sort of how that process can work. And I know there are some people who wonder what IP is. It's intellectual property.
I should have said that. Sorry.
That's okay. So often if it's a character that's on a TV show or something, and then they're making a book about it.
Like, for example, the young adult and middle grade Marvel tie-ins, like here's Black Panther's origin story and, things like that. That's IP. In those cases, I can guarantee those authors are getting very heavy outlines and directions from from Marvel and from their publisher. But there are other IP projects, a lot that I've auditioned for, where they just say, well, here's the premise. What would you do with this? And then I have to write, a synopsis, like, here's what I would do. And that's the audition. And if they like the way I would do the series, then they hire me. And it's kind of more my story. If I can get mine, so there's varying levels to it.
Okay, well, great. So let's, there's a lot of questions here on terminology. So we have pitch versus log line versus thesis statement versus, so how are they different, or is it kind of the same thing?
Okay, now this is just I I don't know if I'm right about this, but here is how I think of them. Logline to me is actually a film word. I think like it's what goes on a movie poster. And I think that's actually super helpful because we have them on book covers. I mean, you'll often see them under the title or somewhere over the book cover. Maybe it is a word for books too. I don't know, but I think that's the log line. How to describe this? If you look at movie posters, it's going to give you a better idea of what that is and how it differs from a pitch. I think when a log line stands alone, it might not be as effective as when you actually see it on the cover, because it's the image combined with the log line that makes you go, oh, I know what this is about. You know what I mean? But a pitch is going to have a little bit more detail. You're going to know at the very least the genre, a vague idea of the premise, and a little bit about what makes it unique, I think.
Okay.
That's how I put it.
Yeah. I think that's a good distinction. The log line kind of needs the whole poster to, the image. Whereas the pitch, they're just getting the words. Yeah. So you do need a little more. Okay, great. Do you, when you're writing your pitch and or even the full description, remember the pitch was just that one sentence and then the description is longer, a paragraph usually or so.
Right.
Do you mention the character's age?
I know, for middle grade, I think, I honestly don't think it's important for middle grade if you are querying an agent and you're saying my middle grade novel. But I also understand that middle grade protagonists, I mean, there's a big difference between, well, I was going to say a 9-year-old and a 12-year-old, but honestly, kids read up. So we don't get a lot of 9-year-old protagonists in middle grade unless it's like super young middle grade. I think they're just going to assume the kid is between 10 and 12. And if it's important to the story, if you're writing like a contemporary realistic novel and it's, the kid's first day of 6th grade, well, yeah, you're going to put that. If there's, a natural way to work in the age because it's important to the story, like Wonder comes to mind. It was very important that he was starting middle school after being homeschooled, that's an important part of it. But if it's, I don't think it's going to make or break you either way. If you have Stacy or 12-year-old Stacy, agent's going to be fine with it either way.
Yeah.
But they're going to assume the kid is 10 to 12, I think.
Yes. I think to me anyway, I would prefer it without the age, because the conflict, the way you describe your character, the situation that character's in should give me an idea of their age.
Yes.
And I always feel if you have to tell me they're 12, then you're not working as hard on the other stuff. So that's just my opinion. But
that's a really good point.
Let's see. So Reed asks, has the industry accepted comps that are TV or movies as well as books? I think so.
Yeah. Absolutely. I would almost say that gives you an advantage.
Yeah.
Publishing wants to be Hollywood so bad.
Yes.
I mean, I think bonus points if you can make it like this popular middle grade book meets this TV show or this movie. If you can do that, you're golden.
Exactly. And it also kind of it shows that you know what your readers like, that you're familiar with pop culture and what's happening now. And I think that's important too.
Very, absolutely.
You obviously want to have movies that are not 50 years old or books.
True. And from an editor's perspective, the reason they're so into that is because they have to sell your book at acquisitions. If they like it, they have to go into acquisitions, which is where the sales and marketing people are. And the sales and marketing people their ears are going to perk up when they hear TV shows and movies, and big giant bestsellers. Like that's just the easiest way for the editor to sell your book for you.
Yeah, so, exactly. Exactly. So can you elaborate on the progressive series versus static? Is this something you mention in a query letter or, So first of all, if you could just redefine those again very briefly, the two
Okay,
types of
yes.
series.
There is a word for there is a word for finite series. In other words, a duology or a trilogy, or
Is it called close-ended? Is that it?
that might
Or
be it.
yeah, opposed to open-ended, which are the series
Yeah.
like Goosebumps that just kept
Yes.
going, going, going.
So
Yeah.
Goosebumps, Fear Street, Ramona Quimby, all of that, that's static series, just infinite number of books. So you can just keep mining that premise over and over and over again infinitely. And
Mhm.
then the others, the trilogies and the duologies, you're pitching something with a definite ending, like The Hunger
Mhm.
Games or Divergent and Harry Potter and all of those.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Yeah. So would you use those words in your query to describe the kind of series, or should the description again show the type of series you have in mind?
If okay, if you're trying to sell a chapter book, definitely. I mean, I almost think that the editor would assume it because almost all chapter books are static series. It's very rare to see chapter books
Mhm.
that are standalones. So
Mhm.
I would mention it there. If you're talking about middle grade, upper middle grade series, it's a little bit tricky because publishers are often hesitant to acquire a whole series. That's not to say they won't do it, but especially if this is going to be your debut, if you're a new author, what an agent and what an editor are going to want to know first and foremost is that you can tell a whole complete story.
Mhm.
Your first book, I'm not saying it has to be a standalone, but it needs to have an ending. You can't leave
Mhm.
it all open and not tie up any of the loose ends. And so I think the key phrase for your query is standalone with series potential.
There
And
you
that
go.
way they can read the book and they see that you gave your character a quest, they completed that quest, but things are open now and the reader might want a little bit more, and so might the publisher.
Yeah.
I
Yeah.
think that's your best bet.
That's great. I like that. And picture book series too, that's how they evolved. They're not purchased as a series, picture books. It's one book
Mhm.
that has, caught on
Right.
with their audience, and the audience wanted more about that character. And so the author wrote another one and then another one. The publisher didn't buy 12 pigeon books, from Mo Willems, started with one. So,
50 fancy Nancy's.
yes, exactly. Can you elaborate a little bit more on the emotional arc? So
Mm.
great follow-up of what you just said. How do you split the arc, but also keep it as a standalone for closure if you're proposing a series? That's a
Okay.
really good question.
That is the best question. This could be this. You're gonna have to cut me off because this could be an entire writing workshop. I have taught workshops about this. I think that the key thing here, and this is so true for middle grade, it's true for any age level, but like if you're writing for kids especially, is your main character's emotional arc has got to tie in with the external arc that is going on. The internal plot has to tie in with the external. And I'm gonna go back to, since I used the Cat Sinclair files, my Ghost Hunters trilogy as an example earlier, I'll use that now.
Hmm.
The external adventure was always about Cat, who did not believe in ghosts, trying to prove that the ghosts in the place they were investigating was not real. That was always like what was going on externally.
Right.
Internally was her resentment towards her mother, and what she got deeper and deeper into was her own resentment towards herself because she blames herself for her parents' divorce. And so the way I tied that into the external arc is that at the end of the first book, Kat begins to become haunted by a version of her, a
Hmm.
ghost version of her that is like the daughter she thinks she should have been to make her mother stay. And there's a piece of that, and it gets a little bit bigger in book 2 and then comes to a climax in book 3. And that's how I brought those two things together. If you can show how the internal and the external come
Hmm.
together, and I
Hmm.
know that that's a lot easier said than done, which is why I said it's a whole writing workshop unto
Right,
itself.
right.
But start there, definitely
Mhm.
start there.
So if you're a new author and you're worried that the publisher might just buy one book instead of your trilogy
Yeah.
to start with, should that emotional arc have some sort of closure at the end of book one, but then you still have potential for bringing it back in book two or expanding on it?
I think so. Yeah. I am pretty positive when I sold the Cat Sinclair files that I wrote an an alternate ending for the
Mm,
first book just in case.
mhm.
Just like you said, like the last chapter, a very slight difference so that it would be satisfying if it ended this way for her. And then the
Right.
other one was the one for the series where the questions got bigger. Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Wow. That's that's a lot of work. All right. We're just going to do maybe two more questions here. I know you all have lots to ask, but I don't want to keep my guests forever. Well, this question, you can answer very quickly. What does on submission mean?
Oh, when your agent sends your book on submission, it means they are submitting it to editors at different imprints, at different publishing houses. They're essentially querying them. They're going to do exactly what you did. They're going to send them a pitch, and if the editor says yes, this is something I want to read, they'll send them the whole manuscript. Usually, your
Mhm.
submission is going to include anywhere from like 10 to 15, I would say, is average editors, and yeah, and then you just cross your fingers.
Woohoo.
Somebody makes that offer.
So this is a great question from Lynn. The pitch you provide when you audition for an IP project, if you're chosen, awesome. But if you're not chosen, have you signed away your right to recycle that failed pitch into your own project with modifications, not using the copyright character?
That's a really good, okay, that totally depends on how much of the pitch the publisher developed before they gave it to you. You know what I mean?
Mhm.
Um,
Mhm.
there's so many examples I want to use that I can't because of contracts.
Yeah.
um, okay, like let's say a publisher came to me and all they said was, we want you to write a book about a boy who is, his parents move him abroad, and now he's an American living in Brazil, and he's going to school there, and it's a mystery.
Mm,
And that's it. I mean, I've had
yeah.
premises that were that big. And then I take it and I make up a mystery. I make up everything, that all the components that go to that mystery, and I give it to them, and then they don't want it. Obviously, I'm not going to take the boy, the expat in Brazil. That's theirs. But I can, anything in that pitch that was mine completely. They didn't give me anything about it. The mystery itself and the construction of it. I can take that.
Okay. Good.
Yeah, they
Good.
don't because they didn't want it. They rejected it. So yeah.
Sure. Sure. Well, that's good to know
Yeah.
because that's a lot of brainstorming and idea development you did, and you don't want to waste it for sure.
No, yeah, you can recycle that stuff. Recycle all your old ideas. Recycle the rejections.
Mary, again, IP is intellectual property. So it's a licensed character that someone, Disney asks someone to write a book about Winnie the Pooh or whatever. And so that's intellectual property.
Yeah.
Last question.
Mhm.
Valerie asks, will you ghostwrite a picture book?
I get queries about that, and I tell them I am so sorry, but I am not qualified. I picture books are such a different world. I genuinely don't know if I could do it. I've never done it before, and I'm definitely not going to charge somebody money. It's like poetry, which I'm
It
terrible
is.
at. I'm so bad at poetry. I
Mhm.
have all the respect in the world for picture book writers, but as a ghostwriter, I specialize in middle grade and young adult because that's where all my experience is.
Mhm. Okay, great, great. Well, Michelle, this has been wonderful. Thank you so much for sharing so much information with us. Everybody go to Michelle's website, check out her books, check out her book coaching
Yeah.
information,
And I have a YouTube channel.
courses. Excuse me?
If anybody likes YouTube, I've got a YouTube channel. If
Awesome.
that's up for you.
Yes, go check it out. She's great. Thank you for being here with us tonight. This was
Thank you for
wonderful.
having me. Yeah, this was so fun. Those were great questions, guys. Thank you.
They're very smart people who come to the Kidlit Social. All right, everybody, we will see you in July. Yes, first and third Tuesday of the month. So our next one is July. So
Already.
see you next month. All right. Bye.